Good evening and welcome to this special Island Stat Sports Talk. I'm your host, Earl Baston. Joining me is the Minister of Sport, Owen Darrell. Mr. Darrell, thank you very much, Minister, for joining me. We wanted to clear this air. There's been, this cloud hanging over Bermuda since September 22nd, when it was
Mhm.
ruled that we were non-compliant from a water standpoint, and there were going to be some restrictions put on us. But I can say as of Friday, WADA did release a statement, and in part it says that the Bermuda National Anti-Doping Organization, to WADA's compliance, we're on the watch list one. So we're able to um, step up our preparation for the upcoming Pan Am Games, which will take place in Santiago de Chile. Earlier today, sir, you released a statement uh, ratifying what WADA has said, that Bermuda will be able to fly the flag, the opening ceremony during any medal presentation, and so forth, which is a good thing for the country. Um, but let's go back a little bit. How did we get to the point where we were put on the non-compliant list?
Yeah, that's a long story. Then I know everybody wants to know how we got here, but the short answer is that WADA has been cracking down worldwide on their list of compliance. And one of the things that WADA has done over the last couple of years, before I came into this seat, was look and really dig into uh, national sports governing bodies and NADOs, which is the National Anti-Doping Associations. Ours is BASADA. But they've been kind of digging into the legislation. And Bermuda's legislation had not been changed, it hadn't been touched since it came into play in 2012. Um, so when we came in, you would recall that Mrs. Debbie Jones Hunter and I traveled to Jamaica for a water conference in January. And there was a lot of confusion with all of the region as to what exactly water was looking for in the legislative changes that we were having in our national sports anti-doping acts. And we after we came back from Jamaica, it was good because we were able to have some dialogue with the regional directors. We actually met the president of WADA. We came back, and it started a lengthy back and forth process between Basada and WADA as to exactly what they were looking for. And you would know, and I just want to remind your viewers, Mr. Basin, that the Bermuda Anti-Doping Sports Anti-Doping Association, BASADA, is actually a quango of government. So it is separate and outside of my ministry. So yes, we do fund them with an annual grant, but their operations, and it's put like that on purpose, are actually to be separate from government. So there's no government interference in the work that they are doing. So it was a lot of back and forth with Basada. And the issue there is that legislation, as you would know, is actually written and controlled by the government. So in one instance, when you have a separation of their daily operations, that's good. But when you have a separation as the drafters that actually draft the legislation with Basara, it's kind of a three-step process, and sometimes things get a little lost in that. Nonetheless, just to bring you along the timeline, the cabinet did consider draft changes to our legislation sometime in May. We did keep WADA abreast of that, and we submitted the potential changes that we were going to make to WADA. And from that point, I will say that WADA went quiet. They said, "Thank you very much. We will review this and we'll get back to you." So let me see. Sometime in June, WADA came back and said, "We still haven't seen your draft legislation," and that again started a back and forth with our ministry, Basada, to say, "We sent you our potential changes. We were waiting for you to get back to us, and we hadn't heard anything." But what came to the fore in September, right before the WADA meeting in Shanghai, was that WADA was actually expecting a draft. They wanted to see actual legislation. I'm not going to get into back and forth, but anyone knows that the legislation is not written by my ministry. It has to go to the drafters. Fortunately, this government is doing a lot of work, and it's a lot of legislation that is being drafted. And um, unfortunately, when you draft legislation, there's kind of like I guess, a queue that you get into. Um, so it wasn't until September that Water really put the hammer down and said, we really want to see this legislation. And I would say, like to take this time to thank the Attorney General and her officers. I mean, they really buckled down. They got this draft legislation, and we got it to a point where we actually thought that Water was happy with it, and we were told by our regional directors that yes, this should be good. We're not going to recommend that you be put on a non-compliant list, and you just as I was surprised when the release came out on, what was it, the 23rd of September. I remember where I was. I was watching my son play football, and it was very disappointing. And as I said in that statement, it was disheartening that we thought that we had gotten to the point where our legislation was clear, and whatever happened in Shanghai, they wanted us to do a little bit more work. So we did, contrary to what you may have seen in other news outlets and not yours, and I would congratulate you for reporting it correctly. Bermuda was not put on a non-compliant list. It was basically a stern warning to us that if we did not produce or make, as they say, corrective actions, that we would have been deemed non-compliant as of what, I think October 13th. We did make corrective action. We took corrective action, which Water put in their latest release. We went back and forth, and we're happy with the outcome that you see. Now, the only reason why our draft legislation has not been sent to Water, I'm sorry, our full legislation, is because the House is currently not sitting, and once it reconvenes in November, I have full confidence that it will receive bipartisan support, and it will be passed into law, and Water will be completely happy with where Bermuda is. So that's a full timeline. I hope that helps you as to how
It,
we got
it,
to where we are.
it does. It does. However,
Mhm.
as you know, and I've expressed this over and over and over. You're not in the House to kind of champion this because you sit in the Senate. So I know it's always given to someone else to kind of, I don't know, chase the lead in the House of Assembly.
Mhm.
But this put us on a different stage of, what I mean, this came down to almost like nationally embarrassed of a possibility, although it's been staved off. But how important is it for the legislatures to know that we need this done? I mean, they've given us until February 12th, but we don't need it done by February 11th. We need it done by November 11th.
Well, it will. The legislation intends to be laid in the House when we return on the third. After that, it goes to the lower house, and then it will come to the upper house where I sit. So I'm very confident that it will receive support in the lower house, and as you know, I sit in the upper house, and you will have no doubt that I will champion this bill across the line way before February. We're looking to have it done the first week of December, passed and done.
Yeah, well, let's hope that sports matters in both houses, that we do get this done.
Absolutely.
In a expedient time, because we
Mhm.
need to make sure that our athletes are doing, because our athletes are doing everything they possibly can to represent the country, and we just need to make
Absolutely,
sure
and
that.
that's one of the disappointing things that did come out of this. And in, I don't think it was your publication, but in other news outlets, there were individuals who I was shocked to see. We had a national coach of a particular sport come out and really take this to a political level. To the point where he called for my resignation, which it was disappointing that the athletes at that time were not in the forefront. And you would have noticed, and we did have some conversation, and you noticed that I did go quiet on it because I know that the work that needed to be done was getting done. And every single morning when I entered the office, the first agenda item on my list of things to do was, I want an update on where we are with this legislation and becoming compliant with what Water wants. And that is what I want to stress today, that the expediency came from the fact that the athletes needed to be represented, and the athletes needed to be put in the fore. Before any of the political back and forth that a couple of individuals wanted to take.
Yeah.
I just
Well,
that
okay. So moving on, now we have the athletes who will represent Bermuda at the Pan Am Games in Santiago, Chile. The opening ceremony is Friday. Um, what's your hope and ambitions for these athletes? I mean, whenever we have four major festivals, over a 4 year period where we have the Olympics, the Pan Am Games, the CAC Games, and obviously the Commonwealth Games. Um, what is your aspirations for the athletes in these particular games, the Pan Am Games in Santiago, Chile?
Well, I'll tell you this. There are 11 athletes going, and a few of these 11 athletes you would have known have been given elite athlete grants from the government in months gone by. And I would hope that these grants have been put to good use. I've seen them training, some of them up at the National Sports Center. Um, and we expect great things from our athletes. The Pan Am Games, as you said, is one of the top games that we participate in as an island. And to that end, the Bermuda government actually has a policy in place that anyone, just like at the CAC Games, you would have seen, any of these 11 athletes that go down and come back with a medal will be rewarded by the government with a financial reward. So that's more of just of this government actually showing that sport matters. We heard from, and I'll call his name, Dage Miners, who is one of the athletes that's going down for the Pan Am Games. But we heard from Dage Miners in January that he needed more support to compete on this world stage. And we heard from him, we heard from a lot of his supporters, and it came a point where we were able to assist him in some of his training and to go overseas and down to Pan Am, and that's kind of where we are as a government, and where I am as the minister responsible for sport, as far as showing tangible ways that we support our athletes.
Yeah, and being that you said that, as the minister, one of the things that I honestly feel should happen all the time is,
Mhm.
no matter who the minister is, no matter which parties and what, when it comes to these four major festivals, the minister should be present to show support from the government and to the athletes, no matter how, no matter where it is. So to that question, well, to that end, will you be in attendance in Santiago, Chile? And if not, why not?
Okay, well, I would tell you this. That is a conversation that I've been having with, former Olympians. I will say that. I've been having conversation with uh, coaches that coach these athletes, and I have actually been having the conversation with the technical officers in my office. It's not too late, but as you know, there are many things in this ministry. I'm not just the minister responsible for sport. I also am responsible for youth. I'm also the minister responsible for culture, um, and there's a balance that does has to have to take place, as well as looking at what is the cost factor to the public as far as getting down there. So I'm not saying that I will not attend. Um, we are still, kind of in the process of seeing, if I do go, what are the benefits? How many athletes I will be able to support? Because I will tell you this: the Pan Am Games is similar to the Olympics. It's a 2 week process, and I can tell you, I cannot go down to Santiago, Chile for 2 weeks. But let's watch this space, Mr. Baisden. And if I can get down to Santiago, Chile to support the athletes, I very much will do so.
Yeah, we talk a lot about changing direction,
Mhm.
having the the slogan "Sports Matters" and so forth. Coming up with that slogan and coming up with the kind of support that the government has been given to the athletes over the last, I would say, 7 years. We've seen a big change, even in the increase of grants, funding for grants, and even the youth grant being increased and so forth. Due to the under the guidance of the former director, and then continued on under the current director. How important is it that this particular government continues to strive to show the athlete, coaches, supporters that they're trying to do everything to increase the value of sport, because sport really does make a difference in our community.
Well, so many times, if Bermuda is on the world stage, and whatever happens, whether they are successful and they move to the next stage, or if the unfortunate circumstances we get knocked out, you would know that a lot of the chatter is about government support. Government needs to support our athletes. Government needs to do more. So that support comes in many different ways. You would have seen in our national sports policy that one of the ways is increasing the usage of the National Sports Center. And I'll be transparent to say that the National Sports Center is a place where I actually go to work out after work every single day. And it was a couple of weeks ago that I noticed that the actual facility was had more people up there. And to their credit, one of the athletes that was training came over and said, Mr. Minister, I want to say thank you. And I looked and I said, thank you. And he says, yes, the reason why we're using the facility is because we're getting ready for an international competition. And, in the national sports policy, it says that we can use the facility, 2 months before. And this is really helping us to prepare. As I, walk out of the facility to my car, you see that just this week, there were young people from different schools. One day, I think it was girls. One day it was boys playing field hockey on the facility up there. So, the support that this government has committed, sometimes it comes in the form of funds. Sometimes it comes in the form of scholarships directly to the athletes, kind of as you saw with the elite athlete scholarship, and sometimes it comes in-kind services, allows the use of the stadium, and different facilities, different fields. We had our national cricket team that just finished a qualifying round, and you may or may not know that we did support them in their endeavors. Um, you know, so there's a lot of support that goes. You can ask many of the national sports governing bodies who email in and ask for stuff, and it may be small stuff like, hey, is it any way possible that you can help us get one of our referees, work permits expedited? So it's things that we do as a Department of Youth, Sport, and Recreation, and as a government, to assist athletes and the national sports governing bodies in preparing for local competitions as well as international competitions. And it's important.
All right. Well, we hopefully we will get the chance to see you in Santiago, Chile. If not, the athletes will know that you're supporting. And I guess the sporting public will be keeping an eye on the legislation to ensure that those things are changed as quickly as possible to wipe that one less thing off the table
Yeah.
that we need to hold us back.
And I would say this. One of the things, and I didn't include this in my summary at the beginning. People say, "Well, what was it that Water was unhappy with?" And one of the things was they wanted a clear distinction, a clear separation between what the work that Basada was doing and any even perceived interference with the minister or the government. So one of the things that we had on the Basada board was that the sports officer, one of the sports officers, sat on the Basada board as an ex officio. And it's a small line item like that we think, oh well, we've got to have some sort of government representation on the board, just so we can know
Mhm.
what's going on. And WADA are very firm on that and saying absolutely not. It has to be the Basada has to do their work totally independent of the government. So it's going to be kind of Basada doing their work, and then they will report back to the minister, and I will get reports. But going forward, we will not actually have an ex officio member on the board, and that's something that's happening, across the world. I got a call from the minister of sport in the Bahamas, and he actually sits on their anti-doping board. And again, WADA sent him a notification that said, this is something that going forward in the near future, you need to get cleaned up. So I know you said it was an embarrassing situation, but I'd like to look at it as we are definitely on the right side of where WADA wants, in enough time before the Pan Am Games and enough time before the Olympics, which is coming up, that the athletes can focus on their training. The athletes can focus on doing the best that they can over in Paris next summer. And I'm very happy and very confident. I'm very pleased with the work that has been done with all of the technical officers, with Miss Hunter over at Masada, um, and everyone over at the AG's chambers.
All right, Minister, thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for clearing it up. And we look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. If not, we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Basin. I
All right.
appreciate it.
Have a good night.